A short time later, some people standing there went to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of those who followed Jesus. The way you talk proves it." Then Peter began to place a curse on himself and swear, "I don't know the man." In our reflections this week, we've been looking at Peter's denial of Jesus. And we come today to look at Peter's third denial, where Peter, with curses, denies knowing Jesus. Matthew, in his narrative, tells us that this took place, Peter's third denial, after a little while. The Gospel of Luke says it was about an hour, Luke 22, verse 59. And I say that to say this, because that would have been plenty of time, half an hour or even an hour, for Peter to reflect on what he had done in his first denial to the servant girl, and in his second denial in front of the assembled crowd. It would have been ample time for Peter to reflect on what he had said and what he had done. It would have been ample time for Peter to confess his sin, to ask for God's help, and to ask God for the strength to make a better choice and to answer truthfully if he was asked the next time. But Peter, poor Peter, vulnerable Peter, is on the slippery slope of denial. And Peter continues the slide down that slope. And the third time, the accusation is even more intimidating. This time, a whole group approaches Peter and they say, "Surely you are one of them." They're no longer simply questioning him about his association with Jesus. They're stating it with certainty. And they state it with certainty because they point to his Galilean accent as evidence that he's one of Jesus's followers. Jesus comes from Galilee. Peter, you've got a Galilean accent. You are one of his followers. Now, be truthful, Peter. We know you are. We know you are, Peter. And here the accusation is not something that Peter was with Jesus, but that he is one of Jesus's followers. And this is yet another way that we, like Peter, can deny Christ. When we deny that we are a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ, a disciple, or even hide the fact, we are ashamed to declare the fact publicly and openly that we go to church of a Sunday. And this can happen to us when someone says to us something like, "So you're one of those Christians, aren't you?" A bit like when the crowd said to Peter, "You're one of those followers of Jesus. You've got that Galilean accent." And so it is with us. It's easy for us sometimes to be a shrinking violet and to deny Jesus. It's easy for us, as it were, to go into our tortoise shell and to hide away. One of the best Christian movies I've ever seen is God's Not Dead. It tells the story of a college student and evangelical Christian by the name of Josh Wheaton, who enrolls in a philosophy class taught by Professor Jeffrey Radisson, an atheist. Professor Radisson demands his students sign a declaration that God is dead to pass the section of the course. Josh is the only student who refuses, and so as a result, Professor Radisson requires that Josh debate with him and to let the other students decide whether God is dead or God's not dead. In his first two debates, Professor Radisson has counter-arguments for all of Josh's points. And in the defining scene in the movie, Josh's girlfriend demands that Josh either sign the statement or drop Professor Radisson's class, given that continuing to stand up to Professor Radisson will jeopardize their academic future. And when Josh refuses, Kara, Josh's girlfriend, breaks up with him. But Josh continues to stand for what he believes in. And in the final engaging debate with Professor Radisson and all the other students respect the stand Josh has taken by standing with him when he invites them to decide whether God is dead or not. Josh, with conviction, took a stand, stood strong for what he believed in. He stood strong for what he believed in. And when the group accuses Peter, Peter doesn't have backbone. Peter doesn't have conviction. Peter doesn't stand strong for what he believes in. The more he opens his mouth, oh, Peter has a big mouth, hasn't he? The more he gives himself away. His accent makes it abundantly clear that he is from Galilee. The first law of holes is to stop digging. But Peter just doesn't get it. Peter can't seem to stop digging. The more he speaks against Christ, the deeper the hole he digs for himself. And note that his reaction is even stronger this time. He calls down curses on himself. He calls down curses on himself. He's most likely calling on God to punish him if what he says is not true. Something along the lines of, may God strike me down dead if I'm not telling you the truth. Well, what grace that God didn't take Peter at his word and strike him down where he stood. What grace. What grace it was that Jesus would lovingly forgive and subsequently restore him. Peter calls down curses upon himself as he denies Jesus in the courtyard. Matthew Henry comments, the way of sin is downhill. And Peter had now reached the very bottom of the slippery slope. He had denied his Lord 3 times, just as Jesus told him he would. He lied about Jesus. He swore with a false oath, and he called down curses on himself. It doesn't get much worse than that, and couldn't get much worse than that for Peter. Join me in teaching truth tomorrow to discover what happened next.